This episode isn't your normal episode. This is an episode that was born out of a need that I know must exist. If there was ever an episode for you to share, this is it. And let me tell you why. It breaks my heart to have to do this episode. As I sit here in Tennessee, just 2 hours away from a level of devastation that I've never seen, nor could I have imagined. My heart aches, and yet there is so little that I can do. That part of the world is literally cut off right now. Some parts you can only access by air. And I know that's just one area. There are many areas that fell in the path of Helene, from the coast all the way up here. One thing I know for sure must be happening, even though I haven't heard reports or seen it on the news. Babies are being born or they're about to be born. And many of those mamas had no plans to be at home without support. And while I know that many of the moms who might need this might also have no way to hear this, I'm hoping that somehow this episode today might help some moms out there who are going to have their babies at home, whether they wanted to or not. And if you aren't one of those moms, understand this was unexpected for those families in the mountains. They didn't know they were going to need this. They didn't know this was coming. And that means something could happen to you too, because you wouldn't know it was coming either. So even if you don't think that this episode applies to you, I encourage you to stay tuned and take notes, because something might happen to you too someday, or your baby might just come faster than you thought, and you might end up having your baby at home even if you didn't mean to. So today, we're going to deal with how you can do this. We're going to give you the tools that you need in your toolbox to handle a baby that comes at home before help can get there, or if help can't get there at all. It's going to be practical tips, practical step-by-step guides to help you through that. So go get out your notebook and pen and let's dive into this. So if you're new here, usually this is the part of the episode right at the start where I do reviews. If you're not new, you know this is review time, but I'm going to skip that today because of how heavy this episode is. But there are a few new reviews, just so you know. The ones of you who have left one, you'll hear yours here soon in the next few weeks. So if you haven't left a review yet, I'd love for you to do that. It helps me find other mamas who need episodes like this one and so many others. But we'll save review time for next week. Also, for those of you who are new, I don't usually fully record every episode for YouTube, but today I'm going to, because I'm trying to make this as available and shareable as possible so that hopefully the moms out there who need this can get to it. This podcast and this show is called Your Birth God's Way. Everything I do here is trying to bring you closer to the Lord, closer to your Creator. And today is no different. And I'm going to start by reading James chapter 4, verses 13 through 15. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. This podcast is about honoring God with our childbirth and doing things His way, and it is about planning. But today we are in a place where there is a huge swath of the country whose plans are gone, and we've got to talk about it. And God never told us not to plan. In talking about leaving all to follow Him, He said in Luke chapter 14, verse 25 and following, now great multitudes went with Him. And He turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Hate in that scripture and in many scriptures in many verses in the scriptures means to love less. So if he doesn't love God more than these things, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish it." Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. So obviously there's something bigger going on here than just planning. But the underlying message here is that planning is not wrong. You have to do it. But at the same time, none of us know what tomorrow holds. Hurricane Helene has impacted far more people than we ever could have anticipated. We knew a lot of people on the coast of Florida would be impacted, of course. Those people knew they should probably evacuate and they had the chance to do so. That doesn't minimize their pain and loss, of course, but at the very least, they knew there was a chance this could happen. And while the forecast told us that there would be a lot of rain in the mountains, it was all based on that cone of uncertainty, and it could have changed or moved in other directions. They had no way to know the depth of destruction that was coming. If you aren't from this part of the world and you haven't seen it, go look up Western North Carolina and Eastern Kentucky. Their interstates, I-40, that goes all the way across the entire country, it's washed out. It's gone in some places. There's another interstate that's washed out. I believe it's I-26. There's lots and lots of local roads that are washed out. There are entire towns that are washed away in raging rapids that came through, and now those towns, what's left of them, are covered in feet of mud. I go to a church with a man who works in law enforcement, and he deals with hard situations all the time. He's a pretty hard guy, pretty tough guy. He got sent out there earlier this week to help, and he got back home Sunday night, last night. I'm recording this on Monday. My husband were there talking to him and asking him questions and just kind of talking about the situation. And twice he was brought to tears thinking about what he had seen. It is unimaginable. Quick note before we dive in. If you're a mama in these areas and there is anything at all I can do for you, I want you to reach out and let me know. I honestly don't know what to do beyond sharing with you what I'm going to share today. But one thing I know I can do is this, and that is to give you the information so that if any of you out there need it and you're able to access it, you can know how to handle giving birth to your baby alone, even if you didn't plan to. And if you are someone who knows someone who lives in any of these places, please, please share this with them. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to walk you through what to do if your baby comes before you can get help, or if you're in a place where help is just not possible. You're going to see me reading my notes. That's just to make sure that I don't get so caught up that I forget something important. So forgive that. And this episode might be long, but it has to be. There's some details here that you're going to need. So get your notebook out. Grab your husband. If I'm talking to mama right now, grab your husband and make him listen too, or have him listen later, because he's going to need to know this. There's going to be a point in time where he's really going to be doing a lot of the things and you're going to be doing the work that you have to do. Sometimes it's going to sound like I'm just talking to him, and that's because I am. Just hear what I'm telling you and listen more than once if you need to. Slow it down if you need to. I tend to talk fast. But remember, whether you planned on being at home or not, you are made to do this. Whether you've ever done it before or not, you're made to do this. Whether in the past you've had your babies at hospitals with epidurals and you think you couldn't do this without that help, I'm here to tell you you can. You can do this, mama. Hear me when I tell you that. Whether you know it or not, women have babies at home all the time, with and without assistance, and almost always everything is fine. I know there's always those small percentages, but know that they really don't happen much. And chances are you are going to be fine, and you're going to be stronger on the other side of this. Your body was made to give birth, and your breasts were made to nourish babies. You can do this. Do you hear me? You can do this. I need you to hear that first. Write that big on the top of your paper. I can do this. Okay? Because with that thought, we can move forward and you're going to be okay. First, let me say that the content of this episode is intended for times like now in Tennessee and North Carolina and Florida. Access to care right now is not guaranteed and it is likely impossible. So many of you are without options. And while I understand the reason why some women today are choosing unassisted childbirth, and while I support your ability to make that choice, I can't, in good conscience, recommend that you choose this. Sometimes things happen and you don't have a choice, but I can't recommend you choose unassisted birth. So don't take this episode as a permission slip like, hey, Lori said I can do this. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that right now there are mamas who don't have a choice. And so I want to help you mamas who don't have a choice right now. And again, those of you who are doing unassisted birth and free birth, I support your choice to do that, but that's not the purpose of this episode. Okay? This is for when things like this happen. There's a catastrophic hurricane that has completely cut off an entire portion of our country, and there is no way in and no way out, and those mamas are going to have to figure this out. Thankfully, a lot of people in those areas are starting to get cell service back, so hopefully if there are moms who need this, they will be able to get it. You can send it to them. And mama, if it wasn't your intention to be at home, let me remind you again that birth is a normal thing. And most babies, when allowed to come in their own time, which that's what's going to happen now because you can't force it now. You can't induce, you can't do anything like that. You're just going to have to let things happen the way they would happen naturally. When babies come that way, most of the time, there are no problems at all. Birth is not something for you to fear. Okay, now it's time to start taking notes. Preparing ahead, things you want to have in a basket or a box or something kind of all in one area. You want to have lots of towels, small ones, big ones, wash rags, all kinds of stuff like that. Blankets, lots of them. Something to clamp or tie the cord. And you're going to need at least two somethings because you clamp it two different places. And if you don't have anything that functions as a clamp, like if you don't have something called hemostats or any other kind of clamp, that's fine. Dental floss or a strong string of some sort will suffice in this situation. And we'll talk about what to do with those in a minute. Clean scissors, a source of warmth if you have electricity and it's possible. If not, you're going to want to think about maybe a way to build a fire outside to keep water warm and things like that. Think about ways that you can make that happen. And you're also going to want to sterilize water ahead of time because most of you don't have a municipal water source right now. So you're going to have to take what water you have and clean it, sterilize it by boiling it. That was my next thing on the list actually, was clean water. So if you have access to it in bottles, that's fine. If not, whatever you can get that you can sterilize and clean, do the best that you can. A bulb syringe if possible. I know that many of you may not have access to that if you weren't planning this at home. That's fine. Maybe you've had a baby before, or maybe you got one in some kind of kit with your baby shower or something. You might have one around. So just look for it. But if not, I'm going to give you other options for that as well. And then pads for mom after birth if you have those available. Okay. The first thing on any list when we're dealing with things that are hard must be prayer. God hears and He knows what you need. This is not going to be easy, but I want to say one more time, you can do it with His help, okay? And if you don't pray, if that's not been your habit in the past, just know that people like me are praying for you. You can do this. Okay, so labor comes. What do we do during labor? If you've never labored naturally, never had a baby before, or never had a baby outside the hospital, what do you do during labor? You do whatever you're comfortable doing. You get in whatever position you're comfortable being in. Your body will tell you how to move. If you feel urges to do certain things, that's usually something inside of your intuition that's helping you know the way you need to move to help your baby come down. Sometimes the baby will be against some certain nerve or bony prominence or different things in your pelvis, and it's uncomfortable. And the reason it's uncomfortable is because it's time for you to move a different way. You don't have to read a textbook to know these things. You will know. You may not even know that you know. You may not realize why you're wanting to move a certain direction. That's fine. You don't have to know. Just know that your body is going to tell you what you need to do at various times. Don't do anything to speed up labor. Don't do anything to slow it down. Just let your body do what it was made to do. Your pelvis, your hips, your uterus, they were all designed to do this exact job without your help. They'll do it. Okay. Now, when it comes time for birth itself, labor may be fast, it may be slow. That part is hard to tell because it's different for everybody and you're in a very different situation. So there's a lot of factors that are going into this. But as much as you can protect that labor space and get yourself into some kind of position and environment that is as comfortable as you can manage, the better. That will help labor to go faster and not last too long. When we get to birth itself, again, get in whatever position that feels comfortable for you. If you're having trouble moving around, then dad, help her into any position she finds comfortable, or mom or mother-in-law, whoever happens to be there. I'm going to say dad throughout this because I can't keep saying every option, obviously. I'm assuming that you will have your husband with you. If you don't, just insert in that gap whoever you might have with you. Or if you don't have anyone, that's okay too. You can still do this. It's just a little harder. If you want to give birth in the water, if you had planned that, or even if you didn't, that's okay. If you have a bathtub and you're able to get warm water in it, there is no rush when the baby is born to get the baby up out of the water. Just know that, okay? But once the baby has come out of the water, like let's say you were squatted down in the water and baby comes out and you stand up and baby's now out of the water, maybe head's out, the rest of the body's not, you can't go back in. Okay, so just be aware of that, especially if you're only in a bathtub. If you weren't planning this, you don't have a nice big labor pool. It's a little logistically difficult, but it's not impossible. It's just that once part of the baby has come out, it has to stay out because now we've been exposed to air. If you go back in the water and they're breathing, they can suck water into their lungs. Before they hit air, they've been in water for all these months. So the water of the bath or the birthing tub doesn't bother them. It's actually pretty cool to watch. If you have the ability to look up a few water birth videos, you can see babies that just stay under the water. The moms keep them under there and it's such a peaceful thing. Now, if you hadn't planned this, that's not something I necessarily recommend, but I just want you to know that it's okay if that's something that helps you to relax and deal with this. Again, once the baby is born, face can't go back in. The baby's head will probably be born and then there will be a pause. Okay, that can be a little disturbing if you're not familiar with the way that labor patterns work. Usually the head will come out and then there will be a period where it's just the head out, but the body's not out. That's okay. During this period of time, that oftentimes you'll get the head out in one contraction and then the contraction will be over. And most moms will feel the urge or want to wait for the next urge of a contraction to push the rest of the body out. That's okay. During this time, often you will see the baby turning, and that's also normal. Usually, not always, but usually the baby will come out looking straight at the mom's spine, basically. And after that head's out, it will start to turn. Okay, that's normal. That's good. They're getting in a position for those shoulders to be able to get under the pubic bone and to make the rest of the way out. But I don't want you to panic when the head's out and the rest of the body isn't out. That's okay. There's a pause there. It's okay. Remember at this time, Mama, this is that time that's called the ring of fire. Okay, it is an intense sensation because your skin is being stretched more than it has ever been before. But that's okay. It doesn't feel great, but it's okay. If you can pant through it, go instead of doing an all-out hard push at this point, you will have a better chance of not tearing as the baby's head comes out. Sometimes you just can't. You can't help it, and your body's going to do what it's going to do. So tearing is something we'll deal with later. You don't need to worry about it too much right now. You've just got to give birth as best that you can in the situation. Now, once the head's out, Dad, you can check and see if there is a cord around the baby's neck. A cord around the neck is not an emergency, but if you slide a finger in there and you can feel a cord and it's loose, if you can get a finger into it and you can just pull it over the head, great. If you can't, that's okay too. It's normal. Somewhere around a third of babies are born with a cord around their neck. It's okay. It's normal. Don't panic about that. Now, if the baby is born still in its bag of waters, which can happen when, again, you haven't been induced, so no one's broken your water, you'll need to tear that bag. Okay, so whether it be mom or dad or whatever, if you'll just take your fingernails and just kind of squeeze it and pull, you'll create a hole that will then let the fluid out. And then what you're going to need to do is to take your hand and to pull the membranes off the face so that the baby can breathe. Okay. Again, these things don't always happen and none of them are emergencies. It's just things you need to be aware of. Once baby is born, once the body is out, the baby needs to go skin to skin with mom. Okay, don't worry about the cord right now, unless the cord is short, in which case you're going to want to not bring the baby all the way up to mom's breast and kind of pay attention to that. Okay, don't automatically yank it up to the breast because if the cord is short, you could tear the cord. Gently bring the baby up, see how much cord you got to work with. And then if you need to, you might have to hold the baby on mommy's tummy, like way on down there. That's okay too. It's just a little less comfortable, but you can do it. Okay. So now baby is out. Cord is still attached to the placenta, which is still inside. Because see, after the baby is born, the placenta is still in there and it's going to need to be born as well. There is no rush for this, okay? Inside of that placenta is a good portion of your baby's blood. And that cord, if you'll feel it, it's actually a pretty cool thing to feel. If you'll just kind of lightly squeeze that cord, you'll feel a pulse in there. As long as that cord is pulsing, it's still working on getting the baby's blood back into its body. So just let it be. There is no rush. There are people who actually choose something called a lotus birth. And in a lotus birth, you leave the placenta attached until the cord comes off on its own off of the baby days later. Okay, so there really, really is no super big urgency to get the placenta out or to get the placenta cut off from the baby. Okay, but we are still going to have to get the placenta out. And when I say we have to, it'll come on its own. I'm just saying when it comes, sometimes there's a little bit that you have to do to just get it to come out. So signs the placenta is about to come. You might see a gush of blood where it wasn't bleeding and now there is bleeding. The cord starts to get longer. Mom has more cramping because that uterus is trying to squeeze that placenta out the same way that it was squeezing the baby out. Sometimes that can take mom aback because she thinks it's over and she's like, what is this pain? Why am I having another contraction? Well, that's the body trying to push out the placenta. And if you look right at the entrance of the vagina, very likely you're going to see it sitting there. Okay. Mom might need to push a little bit to help it come the rest of the way out. In fact, usually she does need to push a little bit just to help it. If you start to receive the placenta and it doesn't feel like it's all the way off, like it kind of feels like it's hanging, what you need to do is to take both hands on it. I'm going to try to show you if you're watching the video, but you can picture this. You're going to just take both hands and slowly rotate it over and over, over and over. Okay, so you're taking the whole thing and just slowly rotating it, not really putting traction on it, just slowly rotating it. And what that's going to do is it's going to help those membranes release off of the uterus so that no little pieces are left behind. Okay, it's really not hard. You don't need to pull and tug. Just keep rotating and those membranes will let go and the placenta will come out into your hands. Okay, once the placenta is out, bleeding will continue in a small amount, but it shouldn't be really gushing or flowing heavy. If it is, what you need to do is massage mom's uterus from the outside. Okay. When you push in to mom's belly now, it's going to be very, very squishy. Or mom, when you push into your own belly, if you're there by yourself, your belly is going to feel squishy now. Obviously, there's no baby in there. Your uterus should not feel squishy. When you push in just below your belly button or right at your belly button, you should feel what feels like a hard grapefruit. Okay, if you don't, a firm grapefruit. If you don't feel a firm grapefruit, if it feels like a squishy something in there, you want to keep rubbing that until it firms up. Okay, sometimes your uterus just needs a little encouragement to do what it's designed to do, which is to clamp down hard to put pressure on that placenta site where the placenta used to be to squeeze off all those blood vessels to help them to start to clot and stop bleeding. Okay, it's just nature's way, God's way of making the bleeding stop. But it doesn't always happen right away or by itself. So that's why you'll need to massage it if it doesn't. Okay. Nursing will also help it firm up. So if you'll put the baby to your breast, that will help because that releases oxytocin, which is what your body's been using to make contractions all through labor. Now it also uses to make that uterus continue to contract to make it nice and firm. Okay, does that make sense? I hope. I asked a question as if you can answer me, right? You can't answer me right now. If you have questions and it doesn't make sense, shoot me an email. I'll be glad to help you. Okay, Nursing again is going to firm it up. If baby is not ready to latch or you can't get baby to latch, you can do nipple stimulation, which is just basically where you take your nipple and you squeeze and maybe twist a little bit. It'll give you the same effect. Okay, I know it might be uncomfortable, but it'll give you the same effect. And at this point, if you're bleeding more than you need to, you got to deal with a little discomfort to get it to stop. Okay. Cutting the cord, again, is not an emergent need right now. People leave it intact all the time on purpose. But if you do want to cut it, once the placenta is out, what you're going to do is you're going to put 2 ties with something like string, floss, clamp, whatever you have, and you're going to put maybe an inch or 2 in between the 2 clamps. One clamp needs to be half an inch or an inch or so from the baby's belly button, okay? And the other one, another inch or 2 past that. Put them on there good and tight. If you're tying, tie it as tight as you can, okay? And then take your scissors that you got before and you're going to cut through in between those clamps, okay? It's tough to cut. Don't be disturbed by that, okay? It's pretty chewy. People describe it as feeling like you're cutting through chicken, okay? Chicken meat, like if you're cutting it up to cook it. It's pretty tough, but I want you to remember that the cord has no nerve ending. So you're not hurting mama and you're not hurting baby. It doesn't hurt anybody. So just cut on through it. It's going to be okay. If it has stopped pulsing, there's a very low likelihood that anything is going to squirt out of it. If you clamped it really early and there's still blood in those vessels that you can see, if the cord hasn't flattened out and turned that whitish color that it does with time, you might get some blood squirting. It's okay as long as you've gotten both of the clamps on as tight as you can. Okay. Now, if mom should start to bleed more, let's say it stops and it starts back, you're going to need to make sure first that she's emptied her bladder. Inside of your pelvis, your bladder and your uterus hang out in the same spot. Okay. But when the bladder is full of urine, it wins. Okay, this fight where they're kind of hanging out down there together, if the bladder starts to fill up, it's going to push that uterus out and it's going to lose its tone. And then you're going to have the bleeding from that placenta site that was formerly squeezed off. So one of the first things to do is to make sure she's gone to the bathroom. It's an easy thing to skip because you get busy with baby, you kind of forget about it, but you got to pee quite frequently, especially if you've been drinking a lot of water. Okay. Then if you still have the bleeding problem, or if she has an empty bladder, maybe she just went to the bathroom and she's still bleeding, you're going to have to, again, massage that uterus to keep it firm. You're going to have to push in pretty good. You're going to have to give it good rub, good squeeze. And if it won't stop, okay, if it continues to bleed after you've done the things we talked about before, you're massaging, you are doing nipple stimulation, or baby's latched onto nurse, and you've emptied the bladder. If the bleeding is still happening, we don't have medicines at this point, right? You don't have that available. What's going to happen could be pretty painful, but it becomes essential at this point. And I don't want you getting scared. This almost never happens. I just want to give you this tool to have in your toolbox in case it does. Someone else who is there with you, hopefully, is going to basically have to push both hands into your belly and manually squeeze your uterus tight. Okay. This is probably a good point to say, if you are going to be an assistant, go ahead and cut your fingernails. Do that right now. Okay. Because you don't want fingernails digging into skin, but you're going to basically, you can feel the uterus through a belly that's as squishy as it is after a baby's born. You can feel it pretty easily. When you get in there and you feel that ball in there, just put both hands around it and squeeze and hold as much pressure as you can. And hold it for a minute, 2, 3, 4, something like that, and then see if that works. Let go. And if it doesn't, you're really going to want to start trying to find some kind of help. It's hard. I know this is scary if it gets to this point. But just simply doing that one squeezing thing, that alone is going to go a long way to helping her bleeding stop. In the meantime, make sure she is drinking a lot of water, a lot of fluids to keep herself hydrated to replace the blood that she's losing. It's not ideal. Obviously, ideal if you were having a postpartum hemorrhage, you want IVs going. You don't have that right now, so we're going to have to do other things to try to make sure that this works. But at the same time, as she's taking water in, she's also going to have to continue keeping her bladder empty. If you have any real salt, any things like Gatorade, things like that that would have electrolytes in it. Make sure she's getting some of that as well so that the water doesn't just run through her, it stays in. Okay, helps those electrolytes help her keep the fluid where it needs to be. Okay, again, these things almost never happen. I don't want you to be afraid of this. I just want you to have the tools so that you don't feel helpless if something does get to this point. Okay, let's shift now to baby care. Once the baby is born, the main goal is to keep the baby warm. Okay, if everything else is normal, there's no issues. We just got to keep baby warm. Okay, and the best way to do this, the best warmer on earth, is mom's body. So keep that baby directly against mom's skin all the time, at all times. Put a blanket over his or her back or a towel or whatever you have, and then just let the baby stay there. Not only does that keep the baby at the perfect position when they're ready to eat, but it also will keep their body temperature regulated. Now, a baby who is born naturally at home may actually not do that screaming cry that you've heard on TV shows and everything, or you've heard when you've had babies at hospitals. That's not actually necessary. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. What you should look for is a baby that's alert and it starts to pink up. When it's first born, a lot of times it'll kind of look a tad bit blue, kind of white, just because as the baby's gone through and got that good squeeze, it kind of just squeezes all the blood out of their extremities and things like that. It's okay initially, but fairly quickly after that, there should be pinking that happens. Like the face is getting pink, the body's getting pink, and all that kind of stuff. If you're African American or darker skin of any other type, it's not as much pink, obviously. It's the darker color, but one of the keys to see the baby's color is the palms of the hands, the mucous membranes, the bottoms of the feet, places like that where the skin's a little bit lighter so you can tell how well the blood is perfusing. Okay, that's where you're going to want to look for those babies. But even those babies can have a pale look to them. Okay, we don't want pale. We want that natural blood-filled skin tone to be filling in. That's your cue, not necessarily the cry. Cry's fine, but if you don't have a cry, but that baby's alert and looking at you and you can tell not struggling to breathe, that's okay. Just keep them against your skin. Now, if the baby is bluish or white or limp or not crying, okay, this is when we've got to do a few extra things. Now, midwives, doctors, we all go through pretty extensive training for this. I'm going to try to help you know some of the things you can do on your own without any equipment so that you can assist your baby if your baby's having trouble. First thing, you want to stimulate your baby by rubbing its back around its spine vigorously and flicking the soles of the feet a little bit. Okay. If that doesn't work right away, you don't need to stay on that part too long. Okay. Usually, if you'll give them a good rub or you'll flick their feet, their soles of their feet, usually that's going to irritate them and make them cry. Okay, that cry then pushes the liquid out of their lungs, which then inflates their lungs and makes them able to breathe, and that usually solves the problem. If it doesn't, don't stay on that too long. Have mom keep talking to the baby. If mom isn't coming around and you have a bulb syringe, you're going to squeeze the air first out of the syringe and then take the tip of that syringe and put it in their mouth and then let go of that bulb and it will suck out anything that's in the mouth. And then you're going to take whatever it sucked out and squirt it onto a towel or something out on the side, then squeeze it back in again, and then do the same thing in each nostril, being careful not to squeeze air into them, but squeezing like you're deflating the bulb away from the baby, then taking the tip while it's still squeezed up, putting it in the mouth or the nose, and then letting go so it sucks out anything that's in there. Do that first. If you don't have a bulb syringe, you can put your mouth over the baby's mouth and nose and do a gentle suck in if you feel like there's something in there that needs to come out, whether it be mucus or bits of vernix, which is the cheesy stuff that can get on babies. If there's any kind of meconium, anything like this that's happened that you think is in there, you can do that. I know it sounds gross, but remember, this is your baby that came from your body, and you're in a situation that is not ideal. So this is better than doing nothing if you feel like your baby needs to have that suction. See, the problem with most babies coming around, it's almost always respiratory. It's never, I don't want to say never, but it's almost never something cardiac. It's almost never really anything else. It's usually respiratory. So all we got to do is get those lungs inflated because see, they've been squeezed down the whole time your baby's been in your belly, if your mom, or in your wife's belly, if it's dad, those lungs haven't been fully inflated yet. They've had fluid in them. As the baby comes down through the birth canal, a lot of that fluid gets squeezed out. Then that first breath, when they first come out, that pushes that fluid out, and that allows the oxygen then to start flowing and the blood exchange to start happening, or the oxygen exchange to start happening with the blood in a new way. Okay. It's a new thing. And I see it just put a thumbs up on there, and there's not going to be anything I can do about editing that. I'm sorry. I guess it thought my hands were making a thumbs up. Forgive me if you're watching the video. At any rate, that first breath is essential, but it's a whole new process that is starting that hasn't happened before. So sometimes you have to do things to help that to happen if it's not happening on its own. So first thing is to suction anything out that might be blocking the airway, because that might be why the baby's not being able to get that good breath in. Okay. Next thing, if the baby is still not coming around, we've suctioned, we've stimulated, things just aren't kicking in. Baby's still kind of floppy and pale. The next thing you can do is give some puffs of breath from the air in your cheeks into the baby's mouth and nose. Again, it seems gross, but this will solve most problems. That is the same as what we do when we use a bag valve mask, like the thing that you've seen in TV shows for CPR. We'll use those to just give some little light breaths to pop those lungs open, and usually those breaths alone are going to solve it. Okay, so your mouth can do the same thing. Now, you don't want to take in a full adult sized breath and blast that into your baby's lungs. Okay. Obviously, that's too much. Your baby is small. So, all you have to do is just kind of fill your cheeks up with air and just lightly into your baby's mouth. Okay. And if you can make your mouth cover the nose and the mouth, that's even better, because you're going to get that seal. If you can't make it cover both, squeeze that nose as you're pushing it into the mouth. And that will accomplish the same thing as what we do when we're resuscitating a baby. Okay. Again, I don't want you to be scared. These things are almost never needed, but I don't want you to be without help and without tools if they are. Okay. If you get to this point and you're still having trouble, keep doing the breaths. Just keep doing the breaths. That's the best thing that you can do, and get help however you can. Call for help. See if there's anyone around who can help you. Okay. Keep baby warm, keep baby dry, pray, and call for help. Now, that all sounded really scary. I get that. But again, my goal here is to basically make you a little mini midwife. Okay. We come into birth knowing that birth usually works just fine. But every now and then there's a baby or a mama who needs a little help. And that's what we're there for, is for when those things happen. And so I'm trying to help you with essentially no equipment be able to do the same things that we do when you end up being in a situation where you can't get to us. Okay. And sadly, some of you are in that situation now. I want to end this with some more scripture, because I know that so many of you are worried to death right now. And while that is only natural, I want you to also know that that worry can't change anything. I want to read to you from Matthew chapter 6. Most of you have probably heard this many times, and if you've listened to my podcast for any length of time, you've heard it. But scripture is there for us to study and to read over and over and over again. And I think that this is a really good time to think about what these verses are really telling us. Starting in verse 25 of chapter 6 of the book of Matthew. Therefore, I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? So why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Now, if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek. For your Father, your heavenly Father, knows that you need all these things. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Has there ever been a more true statement for those of you who are going through this? Sufficient for this day is its own trouble. You don't have time to worry about tomorrow's trouble. But God has promised you that he loves you more than these birds of the air and more than these lilies of the field, and they are always cared for and taken care of. Animals in nature, they give birth when God says to. I should have looked up this first, but it's either in Psalms or Proverbs, where it refers to God being the one that causes the deer to give birth. That means that when you go into labor, God knew it. God knows it's coming. And God's going to provide what you need and the help that you need. And it's not going to be easy, but he wants you to lean on him. And right now, what other choice do you have? It's hard, but you can do it. And I hope and I pray that this makes it to the mamas who need it. And if there is anything at all that I can do to help you, please go to my website or email. The links are in the description, or my website is just go.yourbirthgodsway.com. You can find me there. Send me an email and I will do whatever I can. I check my emails through the day when I'm able, looking for things that are urgent. This is urgent. If there's anything that I can do to help you mamas who are out there in North Carolina and South Carolina and Tennessee who are stuck and can't get help, please reach out to me. And if you're one that's not there, I ask again humbly that you will share this. Not because I'm the only place that has this type of information available or that I'm anything special, but this is one place that does have the information available, and I want to help a mama if I can. So please share. I'll see you guys right back here next week with another episode.